Some of the best games ever made failed. Not because they were broken, not because players hated them, but because of timing, marketing mistakes, or decisions completely outside the developer's control. So if you enjoy honest game reviews and countdowns like this, hit like and subscribe. It generally helps the channel grow. Now let's get into it. At number 10, we have the 2010 game Enslaved: Odyssey to the West. Enslaved delivered cinematic storytelling, strong performances, and impressive motion capture for its time. It was developed by Ninja Theory, and critics actually praised it. Players who bought it, well, they loved it. So what went wrong? The timing. It released on October 5th, 2010 in North America, right in the middle of the most brutal holiday window imaginable. Here's what it was up against: Halo Reach, Dead Rising 2, Medal of Honor, Fallout New Vegas, and Call of Duty Black Ops 1. These were all games that were released close to the time. And that's not competition, that's execution by schedule. Gamers weren't buying 5 full-priced games in 1 month. They were choosing 1 or 2. Most players will choose familiar franchises. Enslaved was a brand new game at the time, a brand new franchise. It reportedly sold around 460,000 copies in its first few months. Not terrible for a new game, but in AAA expectations, it just was not enough. It didn't fail because it was bad, it failed because it launched into a war zone of releases. Up next, we have the Prince of Persia, the 2008 version. When people think of Prince of Persia, they usually think of the Sands of Time trilogy. Dark atmosphere, time rewind mechanics, high-risk platforming, combat that felt tense and deliberate. Then in 2008, Ubisoft rebooted the series, and everything changed. The first big difference was the art style. Instead of the grounded, semi-realistic looks of Sands of Time, this new Prince of Persia used a bold, cel-shaded, almost painterly aesthetic. It looked like a moving piece of concept art. Some players loved it, but many immediately rejected it because it didn't look like the prince they knew. The second major change was difficulty and failure design. In the Sands of Time, if you missed a jump or died in combat, you relied on the Dagger of Time to rewind. There was tension, you could fail. In the 2008 reboot, you truly could not die. If you fell during platforming or lost in combat, your companion Alika would save you and reset you to safety. For some players, that removed the risk. It felt less punishing, less intense, less challenging, less traditional. Combat also shifted. Instead of fighting groups of enemies, encounters were mostly one-on-one boss-style battles. It became slower, more deliberate, more cinematic, but fans who loved the flowing multi-enemy combat of Sands of Time felt something was missing. And then there was tone. The Sands of Time trilogy carried a darker, almost tragic emotional arc. The 2008 reboot leaned more into romantic storytelling and stylized fantasy. It wasn't a bad direction, it was just different. And that's the key point. Prince of Persia of 2008 didn't fail because it was broken, it reviewed well. Critics praised its art direction, animation, and chemistry between the prince and Alika, but it wasn't the sequel fans expected. And when you change the identity of a beloved franchise too quickly, audiences can react before they fully experience it. Sometimes innovation is punished, and the Prince of Persia 2008 is one of the clearest examples of that. Up at number 3, we have LA Noire of 2011. When LA Noire was announced, expectations were massive. It had Rockstar's name attached to it, the same company behind Grand Theft Auto. I mean, who doesn't even know that? The marketing leaned heavily into that connection. Trailers focused on the open city of 1940s Los Angeles, car chases, shootouts, and crime drama. It was positioned like the next big open-world crime epic. But that wasn't really what the game was. Yes, the city was there, and yes, you could drive around. But the core of LA Noire wasn't the chaos, it was the interrogation. It was reading facial expressions using groundbreaking motion capture technology. It was slowly piecing together cases, spotting contradictions, and deciding whether a suspect was telling the truth, lying, or hiding something. That's a very different experience from GTA, I guess. It was slower, more methodical, and more investigative, if that's the right word. And here's where the disconnect happened. The marketing sold intensity, the gameplay delivered patience. I personally did not mind it. I loved it. It was something different compared to GTA. And I love the realism of it. Players who went in expecting a sandbox full of mayhem sometimes felt restricted. And when expectations are set one way, even a well-made game can feel disappointing if it doesn't match the promise. Critically, LA Noire performed very well. It was praised for its technology and ambition, but long-term player enthusiasm dropped because many people realized it wasn't the game they thought they were buying. It didn't fail because it lacked quality, it struggled because the message didn't match the product. And in gaming, perception can matter just as much as gameplay. Personally, again, I loved it, and I would love it if they bought out LA Noire 2. I would definitely be all over that. Up next, we have Mad Max of 2015. Mad Max launched on the same day as Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, September 1st, 2015. And that timing absolutely shaped how it performed. On that very first week in the UK charts, Metal Gear Solid 5 took number 1, while Mad Max debuted at number 2, right behind it. That's telling on its own. 2 brand new titles, same release date, and one completely dominated the charts, but the gap becomes clearer when you look at raw sales momentum. Metal Gear Solid 5 shipped over 3 million copies worldwide within its first 5 days, racking up an eye-watering $179 million in revenue on launch day alone. More than even big movies like Avengers, Age of Ultron, and Jurassic World combined. Meanwhile, Mad Max, while earning a respectable position in the charts, did not match that blowout level early sales. According to Steam data from the same launch window, Mad Max was tracking hundreds of thousands of copies on PC alone, roughly about 363,000 reported on Steam initially. But that's a far cry from the multi-millions of MGSV, Metal Gear Solid 5. So, in the first 2 weeks of sales race, Metal Gear Solid 5 was not just winning, it was running away with it. It set franchise records for opening week performance, while Mad Max was essentially fighting for visibility and budget attention at the same moment gamers were focused on a blockbuster release. From a timing perspective, it's a perfect example of 2015's release calendar stacking the deck. Mad Max wasn't a bad game, had a very good open world and a good story to it, and something different as well. And it did have a solid initial performance, but sharing ground on launch day with one of the biggest franchise entries in years meant it didn't break through the noise the way it might have in a quieter slot. Who knows? A month or two later, a month or two earlier, maybe it would have got more traction. Next up, we have Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil was a critically praised adventure with a strong story, memorable characters, and a unique world. But it launched at the worst possible time, November 2003, right in the heart of the holiday season. It was up against heavy hitters like The Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, Need for Speed Underground 1, and Broken Sword: The Sleeping Dragon. These were big franchises or genre staples, all competing for attention and play budgets. Even though fans and critics loved Jade's adventure, the crowded launch window made it hard for Beyond Good and Evil to stand out. It didn't fail because it was bad. It failed because it was overshadowed by timing and competition, a perfect example of how great games can struggle when the stars do not align. Next up, we have Prey. When Prey released in 2017, it was an immersive sim that many players loved. Rich world design, interesting systems, and a vibe that fans of System Shock and BioShock appreciated. But it suffered from something most people don't immediately think about: identity confusion before it even launched. See, there was another game called Prey 2 in development, announced years earlier as a direct sequel to the original Prey from 2006. That version looked promising and had a certain fan anticipation behind it. Then Prey 2 was cancelled. Soon after, a completely different project, originally codenamed New Prey, was rebranded as Prey. This new game had almost nothing to do with the cancelled sequel, different mechanics and a different setting and a reimagined concept. The problem? Players saw the name Prey 2 for years, built expectations around what Prey sequel would be, and then suddenly, the 2017 Prey arrives, and it isn't the same game many folks thought they were getting. On top of that, marketing didn't fully clarify what the game actually was. Was it a sequel, a reboot, or an entirely new experience? Many players couldn't immediately answer that because the messaging was inconsistent, of course. So instead of excitement, some of the early buzz leaned toward confusion. And here's the key bit: confusion doesn't drive pre-orders, it doesn't drive confidence, and it does not build hype. Even though Prey was good and reviews praised its design and systems, the identity muddle meant that potential players didn't know what to make of it until after release. And by then, the initial launch window had passed. This is why Prey 2017 didn't fail, because it lacked quality. It struggled because it couldn't clearly communicate what it was to the audience walking into stores or scrolling through digital storefronts. Alan Wake of 2010. Alan Wake was a cinematic, story-driven thriller with a gripping narrative, intense atmosphere, and brilliant lighting and sound design. Remedy Entertainment crafted a game that felt like playing a psychological TV series, and players who experienced it were hooked. But timing was everything. It released on May 18, 2010 in North America, dangerously close to Red Dead Redemption 1, which had launched just a few weeks earlier in March. or a few months, should I say. Rockstar's blockbuster dominated conversation, reviews, and attention for months. Even though Alan Wake had its own unique appeal, players and media were still caught up in Rockstar's open-world epic. It wasn't that Alan Wake was bad, it was overshadowed by a cultural phenomenon. To make matters trickier, Alan Wake had a niche style. Its episodic story structure and slower psychological pacing contrasted sharply with the explosive action of most mainstream games at the time. That made it harder to capture broad attention quickly. Critically, it was praised for storytelling, atmosphere, and innovative use of light in combat. Fans loved the writing and mystery, but commercially, the shadow of Red Dead Redemption meant it didn't reach as many players as it deserved. Alan Wake is a perfect example of how even high-quality games can struggle when timing and competition align against them. At number 8, we have Spec Ops: The Line of 2012. At first glance, Spec Ops: The Line looked like just another military shooter, the kind that flooded the market after Call of Duty's massive success. Cover-based shooting, modern military setting, explosions everywhere. Nothing surprising, but underneath the surface, it was something completely different. The game deconstructed the genre, forcing players to face moral choices, the consequences of violence, and the psychological weight of war. It was dark, uncomfortable, and thought-provoking. Here's the problem: the market did not communicate that. Players expect a fast-paced, power fantasy shooter like Call of Duty. Instead, they got a story about guilt, trauma, and the moral ambiguity of every choice. The narrative forced players to question what they were doing on screen, and that discomfort didn't sit well with a mainstream audience expecting pure action. To make matters worse, it launched in June 2012 alongside heavy hitters in the shooter and action genres. It didn't have a pre-existing fanbase or a big franchise name to pull attention. By the time players realized it was actually something special, the initial sales momentum had already passed. Critics recognized its brilliance, praising storytelling, moral complexity, and atmosphere. Fans who played it often called it a masterpiece, but commercially it underperformed. Spec Ops: The Line didn't fail because it was bad, it failed because players didn't know what to expect, and expectations were misaligned with reality. It's now remembered as one of the most underrated and intellectually challenging shooters of its era. At number 9, we have Sleeping Dogs of 2012. Sleeping Dogs was one of the most underrated open-world games of its generation. Set in a vibrant, living Hong Kong, it combined thrilling hand-to-hand combat, satisfying driving mechanics, and a gripping undercover cop story. I mean, I cannot believe we're even talking about this game as a failure. I mean, this game is absolutely beautiful. This game should have been an absolute hit. Critics loved it, players who picked it up were hooked, reviews praised its combat, setting, and narrative, and it generally felt like a smaller-scale Asian-inspired Grand Theft Auto. So why did it explode commercially? Part of the problem was publisher instability. The game was originally developed by United Front Games under the title of True Crime Hong Kong, part of the True Crime franchise, but Activision cancelled it in 2011, fearing it wouldn't compete with other AAA open-world games. Then Square Enix picked it up, rebranded it as Sleeping Dogs, and released it in August of 2012. By that point, the momentum had already been lost. Marketing didn't have the budget or time to build a huge pre-launch hype campaign. Many players didn't even know the game existed until release week. On top of that, the release window was competitive. It came out in the shadow of big summer titles, including shooters and action games that dominated attention and budget. Even though Sleeping Dogs was technically excellent and critically praised, and I would highly advise anybody that's never ever played it to go pick it up today and give it a go. Trust me, I think you will love it. But it was critically praised. The combination of publisher turmoil, branding confusion, and poor marketing timing held it back. It didn't fail because it was bad. It failed because business circumstances prevented it from reaching the audience it deserved. Today, it's remembered as a hidden gem, a game that could have been a major franchise if things had gone differently. I could promise you if things did go differently, we would have had a Sleeping Dogs 2, 3, maybe a 4 and a 5 by now. And it probably would have been up there with some of the biggest franchises of all time. And last but not least, we have Titanfall 2 of 2016. Now, Titanfall 2 is often called one of the best first-person shooters of its generation. Fluid movement, incredible gunplay, and a single-player campaign that rivaled AAA narratives. Respawn built an absolute masterpiece. So why didn't it dominate? Timing. Pure and simple. It launched on October 28th of 2016, right between two massive shooter franchises. Battlefield 1 released just 2 weeks earlier with its huge World War I setting and massive multiplayer hype. And after that, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare which were released 2 weeks after Titanfall 2 with one of the most recognizable names in gaming. That left Titanfall 2 sandwiched in the middle. Gamers' attention and budgets were already tied up in two gigantic franchises. Even with glowing reviews and a perfect campaign, Titanfall 2 simply couldn't break through the noise. Critically, it was praised for everything from mechanics to level design. Fans loved the multiplayer and the Titan combat, but in terms of sales and visibility, it was overshadowed. Titanfall 2 didn't fail because it was bad, it failed because it launched into a perfect storm of competition, showing just how brutal release windows can be in the AAA shooter market. So, none of these games failed because they were bad. They failed because of timing, expectations, marketing decisions, or pure bad luck. And that's what makes it frustrating. If you enjoyed this countdown, like the video and subscribe for more game reviews and gaming countdowns. And tell me in the comments which game deserved better or which one should have been on this list. And even if you have an idea of 10 game countdowns, please let me know in the comments.